Hey everybody, you're probably wondering why this opens up on the U.S. Department of Agriculture page when I said I was going to talk about the census, the Bureau of Economic Advisors, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Um, Indulge me for a minute here. What I want to make a pitch for is the idea that there is all kinds of data out there on reliable government sources. Um, and I would encourage you to use the data that's available. I clicked on the Department of Agriculture because I just wanted to see what kind of data is out there. And lo and behold, I found a whole lot of data on the USDA website. And it reminded one particular point of data that I found reminded me of something that I had read a few years ago called The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. So Michael Pollan talked about the United States having a heavy dependence on corn in our diet and for other sources like energy. So, from the United States Department of Agriculture, I went to what's called the Farm Services Agency, which is one of the agencies within the Department of Agriculture. And I came upon this spreadsheet with uh, excellent data on acres planted in the United States, farm acres planted in the United States in 2018. And this is actually a very current spreadsheet. You can see it's dated 28 January. Um, so what this does, this spreadsheet, is it tracks several grain commodities: barley, corn, cotton, two kinds of cotton, oats, rice, sorghum, soybeans, sugar beets, and sugarcane, along with wheat, the last one. And what it does is it talks about the acreage in production in 2018 of these various crops. So you can see it goes alphabetic: Alabama, Alaska. If you lived in Alaska, you know there's not much agriculture that goes on there. It's not very suitable for agriculture. Um, but let's scroll down to Nebraska for a second. Here's Nebraska. In 2018, Nebraska had about 8,500 acres in production of barley. Shoot over to corn, about 114,000 acres of oats, 119,000 acres of sorghum, about 45,000 acres, pretty small number of sugar beets, which are probably out in the western, kind of the Wyoming, Colorado part of Nebraska. Um, but look at corn: 9,500,000 acres, so what, 9.5 million acres of corn, and about 5.6 million acres of soybeans. Let's go to Iowa. So in Iowa in 2018, there were almost 13 million, 12.9 million acres of corn, almost 9.9 million acres of soybeans. If we go to the United States as a total, what do we find? We find that in 2018, and the previous several years haven't varied much, there are about 86.4 million acres in production of corn and about 87.9, almost 88 million acres in production of soybeans in the United States. And so you can see the other commodities at the bottom, and they're not small. I mean, 11 million acres of cotton, for example, and as it turns out, a lot of that cotton ends up being exported to other countries where uh, fabric and textiles are made. But corn and soybeans have been in the news a lot lately, particularly soybeans have in the news as we discuss trade relationships between the United States and other countries. And so what we know is that the commodity price for soybeans has been depressed, but we have farmers in Nebraska and Iowa and across the United States in those growing regions where soybeans are a huge part of their production planting. So when you rely on corn and soybeans as two very large production crops, when the price is depressed, what are the implications of that for you in the microeconomy as well as the macroeconomy in the United States? And further, what are the implications for national agricultural policy in the United States of an economy that is heavily reliant on two crops? Now, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think it's a valid question that needs to be asked about public policy. And so that's why it's important that we consult data when we are trying to get information. Um, Here is another, just an example. Let me go to that. I guess I don't have it. Okay, so this is the City of Omaha website, or at least part of it. Um, and I was making a pitch for getting budget data to someone the other day. Um, if you want to talk about the budget of the City of Omaha, you can find out about it by consuming the local news media, which is fine. You should. But also, if you want to know it from the source, you should probably go to the city's website. So here on the city's website, I would find departments, and I might find the finance department here. And when I find the finance department, what I'm going to find on the finance department is the budget. So they're in red: budget and accounting, revenue, payroll. And here, if we scroll down, we see budgets for all these years. So if I clicked on the budget, I would actually find some of the City of Omaha's budget display for 2018, and there it is right there. So city funds, grant funds, revenue, appropriations, and then it goes through department by department: law department, human resources department, human rights and relations department, finance department, police department, fire department, and so on. So if I really want to know about the city's budget, this is probably where I should go. And this is where I'd find out that the City of Omaha's budget um, is about 990 million for 2019. It's approaching $1 billion, the total budget for 2019. But this is where I'd find it out. Okay, so my pitch essentially is that there are reliable sources of data at local levels of government, state levels of government, and the national level of government for us to get data that we can use for policy analysis. So let me move into what I really wanted to talk about today. Here is the Census Department. And in the next two demos, I'm going to talk about this one, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But right now, let's focus on census. Okay, census, as I said in the lecture, is arguably, the oldest data gathering branch of the United States government. So the census was founded, it's in the Constitution, to count. It's grown much more sophisticated since 1790. What I want to do in this little demo is talk about some ways you can get data for your policy analysis, useful data. But the census website, along with the BEA and the BLS and other websites, really, I can only scratch the surface. I will tell you that CPAR, part of the College of Public Affairs and Community Service, the Center for Public Affairs Research, CPAR, actually sponsors a census data users conference every year in August. It's not offered really to students or instructors, for that matter, on a course basis. It is offered as a service that the university provides, and many nonprofits and even businesses actually take advantage of that and pay the fairly low tuition to participate in the Census Data Users Conference. And if you think your agency might have an interest in that, I would contact CPAR and ask them about the Data Users Conference coming up in August. So we're just going to scratch the surface, as I said, because there's so much data on the census. And really, one of the ways to learn to use the census is to actually just get into it and start looking around. So there's different survey programs that the census uses. Of course, there is the classic census, so like the 2010 census, and this talks about the upcoming 2020 census. Another very important one is the American Community Survey, which actually happens in the years between the 10-year censuses. But there's also important important censuses that are done by the Census Bureau, like the Census of Governments, which I'm going to refer to today, the Current Population Survey, and many others. What I want to talk about today is how to use something called the American FactFinder, which actually used to just pop up right away on the census homepage. It's changed a little bit. So here's how you get to American FactFinder. You go to the tab that says Explore Data, and then you click on the first link there that says Explore Data Main. So I'll click on that, and I'm going to get some programs for exploring data. So it says American FactFinder, Preview New Data Experience, Quick Facts. I'm going to click on American FactFinder. And here the American FactFinder pops up. So this is the American FactFinder page. I think the pictures change every so often. But here's the American FactFinder page. Here's why this is really handy. This is handy because it really tries to provide a lot of the FAQs, if you will, the frequently asked questions or the frequently used tables that a lot of people use when they are going to the Census Bureau for information. So you can see, for example, annual population estimates. You want to know the population of the United States, and you would go to that link and click on that, and a table is going to come up, and here it is right here. So here's the population of the United States from the 2010 census forward through these years. Now, I think I mentioned in the lecture sometimes information varies. So what I will tell you, for example, is in the American Community Survey, some of the population numbers for these years are different than this look at the population of the United States. Now, is it vastly different? Probably not. And in some ways, just if you're looking at population, it's not going to change a lot. But here again, I want to say that when you're looking at data from the census, make sure you're consistent across programs. So if you're using the every 10-year census, use that information. If you're using the American Community Survey, use that information consistently. If you're using this information from these programs, use it consistently. And what will help you a little bit, like in this chart, there's always footnotes down here on the census information. When they display a chart, it's going to tell you where it came from. So it's important to understand where the data are coming from in this. But again, this is just information that people commonly want to know. Hey, what's the population of the United States? What has it been, and what's the population of my state? So let's go back to Maine here, and this is going to take us right back to the American FactFinder. So here they are right here, the tabs. So we can always get back using Maine to the American FactFinder. Okay, so what do I want to do with American FactFinder? As I said, all kinds of stuff you can get from American FactFinder, but I'm going to show you a couple that I think are really interesting. So, community facts. Let's say we want to know a few community facts about where we live. So I type in Omaha, Nebraska, it pops up there, and I hit go. So, if you're working on a project and you needed information on Omaha, Nebraska, it's possible that some of the stuff you're looking for actually happens to be here, that the census had anticipated some of the needs of typical users. So look at these tabs here. Population of Omaha, Nebraska on the 2010 census. So here again, a reminder that you want to know what source of data you're looking at. This was the 2010 total population, 408,958 people in Omaha, Nebraska. Okay, that's interesting. But you could come down here and you could get some other tables: general population and housing characteristics, race and Hispanic origin, Hispanic or Latino by type, household and families. You might want to look at business and industry, or I'm sorry, let me go right to age. So here it gives the median age for Omaha. Um, and this actually happens to be a different source. So you can see here that this is the 2013-2017 ACS 5-year estimates, right? Something to keep in mind if you're gathering data. Business and industry. There's 37,664 companies in Omaha. According to another program, the Survey of Business Owners, which is another census program, I didn't realize there were that many businesses in Omaha. Education, it talks about, it headlines with this. This is the high school graduation rate, again on the ACS, 88.4% in Omaha. And then here's some other tables on education. We could go through all of these categories if we want. Income might be interesting to you. So here's the median household income in Omaha, according to the ACS 5-year estimates, $53,789. That's a median household income. And so keep in mind that household income is different than individual income. It's a different way of tracking income based on the population living in a residence at the census. And so this part of the American FactFinder, really you can localize, or you can put in a state or some other geography, and you can get this kind of data, and it might be the kind of data that you actually need for your project. So let me go back to Maine here. We'll get into more levels of detail. So I'm back at the main menu, and I'm going to do an advanced search. So this says search all data in American FactFinder with access to all geographic types and data sets. So I'm going to say show me all. And I want to do a new search here. Okay. So here I am in the advanced search topics. So what kind of topics do I want? I could go to these. I could go to geographies, race and ethnicity, industry codes, EEO. I'm going to topics. So here in this menu, in this window, I get a lot of topics that I might be interested in. So what am I interested in? Let's say I'm interested in school districts. So on school districts, I don't see anything that is school districts, but I'm interested in K-12 education. So I'm guessing it's a school district is part of government. And sure enough, public school system finances come up. What I'm happen to be interested in public school finances, for example. So I click on that, and here it loads for me. So let's say I'm interested in revenue, the revenue sources of public schools. So I click on revenue, and I don't know if you saw what happened there. It took revenue and it moved it up here to my selections. So it says your selections. It hit revenue, right? So now I know I'm tracking revenue. So when it hit revenue there, I get all these tables, and there's actually, you can see here, 3 pages of tables. Just a ton of tables that I want here, right? Well, so here's some I might be interested in. Annual survey of school system finances, revenue from state sources for public elementary, revenue from federal sources, revenue from local sources. So I want to refine this a little more. I'm going to go to geographies. And so it says most requested geographic types. I'm just going to leave that alone and come down to this selection menu. I'm going to hit state. And here my state menu pops up. Okay, let's say I want Nebraska. So I'm going to come down here to Nebraska. I'm going to click on Nebraska, and I'm going to add that to my selection. So again, up here in my upper left-hand corner, I'm searching for government public school system finances. I'm searching for revenues, and now I've specified my geography, which is the state of Nebraska. So I can close this now because I've added it. Now I have fewer tables because I've narrowed down my geography from the whole United States to just in Nebraska. So here we see some tables. The annual survey of school system finances, summary of public and elementary secondary school system finances by state, revenue from federal sources, revenue from state sources, revenue from local sources, percentage distribution of public elementary secondary school system revenue by source and state. So let's say I'm interested in knowing what are the percentages of the three main sources of revenue, that being the federal, the state, and the local sources to school systems in Nebraska. So let me click on see if this one works. So this is percentage wise, and it's not telling me actual dollars, which might be interesting to me as well. So this happened to be 2014, but what this is telling me over here is that this same table, I could get data for 2013, 2015, and 2016 as well. So for the year 2014, here's the revenue coming into public education in Nebraska. So total revenue is 100%. Revenue from federal sources is 8.1%. Revenue from federal sources Title I, which is a subset of that, is 1.5%. Revenue from state sources, and here we get into ways of looking at how state sources work. So total state sources, 32.7%. So 24.2% of that total, this is a subset of that, is from the General Formula Assistance, which in Nebraska is called TIOSA, but other states have a assistance formula. So revenue from local sources, 59.2%. Revenue from local sources, taxes, 53.5%. From other local governments, and then revenue from local sources. So here's what this is telling me. I'm going to speculate here that a lot of this is property taxes in Nebraska. I don't know for sure. So I'm going to go back to my advanced search and watch what happens. When I go back to my advanced search option, my geography is going to stay the same. Revenues and Nebraska. It's going to stay the same until I clear it out. I did the percentage distribution, right? I really want to know more about local sources. So I'm going to come down here to this table. As I scroll the tables, I look at the titles. Revenue from local sources for public elementary/secondary school systems by the state. So again, my only geography happens to be Nebraska here. Now I can look and say, okay, this was actually $2 billion. So it says it's in thousands, so add 3 zeros to that. So there's about $2.2 billion of revenue to Nebraska schools in 2013. I'm going to take it back to 2014, which was I was looking at before. So 2014, about $2.3 billion in revenue for all schools in the state of Nebraska. I specified this local sources one, $1.9 billion in revenue from property taxes. Okay, so now I'm starting to paint a picture. What if I'm looking at what kinds of taxation is used to support public schools? This has given me a lot of information. Now let's say I think, oh well, that's really interesting. What if I wanted to compare Nebraska to some other state? Well, I might want to go back to my advanced search again. And again, if I do that, I see my sources up here, revenues, state of Nebraska. I'm going to add a geography here. Let's add another state here. So, state. Let's see how Nebraska compares, for example, to Iowa. So let's add Iowa to our selections here. Close that out. Now, let's go back to look at the same chart, revenue from local sources for public elementary and secondary school systems by the state. This is 2013, but I think we can switch this to 2014 when we get into it again. Yeah, so let's do that. So here we see that it looks like Iowa has kind of a similar structure to Nebraska in terms of the use of property tax. Now, what if I wanted to compare this across the board? Okay, so I could do that. So let me add one more geography here, and I'm just going to stay, again, I'm going to stick on states, but I'm going to say all states within the United States and Puerto Rico and add that to my selections. Now, I will tell you that more charts will come up here because we're talking about the entire United States. Okay, it's not really, but okay. So annual survey of school systems, revenue from local sources, that's the one I was on. And when I get in this chart, I'm going to click to 2014 again. Now, this actually might start to tell us something about revenue from local sources compared to so revenue from property taxes compared to revenue from local sources, right? The other thing that we can now start to look at is is property taxes the main source of local revenue? And so what you can see on this chart is that there are other sources of local revenue beyond property taxes, for example, from the parent government, that being from the city. Now, the city or region might actually get most of its revenue from property taxes as well, but in Nebraska, for example, the property taxes that go to schools are actually levied by the school districts and not by any parent government for the district. So here we can actually start to make a comparison. Now, the last thing is I go back to my advanced search, and it's going to come to my tables again. And let's see if I can get the go back to the percentages chart that I first found. Okay, so percentage of public elementary and secondary school system revenue by source. So this is going to take me back to my table on the split between federal sources, state sources, and local sources. Okay, so this is just listed alphabetically here. So Alabama all the way through to Wyoming. But what we can see here is the revenue from federal sources doesn't vary wildly. It goes as high as 15%, goes as low as around 6%. Revenue from state sources varies a lot. Look at Arkansas, 77% of school funding is from state sources. Minnesota, 69% of revenue for public schools is from state sources. Nebraska, only 32%, 33% almost, is from state sources. So we see a lot of variance there in state sources, and now we can compare this to revenue from local sources in this column, and we see that this also varies. We go as very low in Arkansas, 11.9% is from local sources. Hawaii is going to be almost zero because, as it turns out, Hawaii is the one state where the entire public school system is really a state sponsored districts. So 87.3% of the revenue for public schools is from state sources in Hawaii. And so we come back to Nebraska and we see 59.2% of the funding for schools is from local sources. The lion's share of that is from property taxes. So now we're actually able to start making some comparisons. Okay, so I looked at some education topics. I want to look at a new topic. So I'm going to go to Maine. And I'm going to go to advanced search again. Actually, you know what? Let's go back to Maine, and I want to show you how to use guided search as well. But okay, and what says changing to guided search will clear all the items in my selection. So it's going to clear all those geographies that I put in earlier. So I'm really starting over. So let's say I'm looking for information about people, like population. So I might be interested in basic count and estimates. So let me click on that. So it lists the civilian population. The reason it lists that is because actually active duty military aren't, they're listed in another place, but civilian population listed here, and I'm going to hit next. Okay, so here again, I'm going to select my geography, and I'm going to say state. So let's go ahead with all states within the United States and Puerto Rico and add that to my selection. Hit next, and I'm going to get a chart that says this. Here on this, it gives me some options. I could actually select from basic groups aggregated by ancestry or tribe, or I can select from detailed groups. I'm going to skip this step. I'm just going to go to the basic counts, and here I can actually get a variety of charts that might be useful to me. So this says sex by age by veteran status for the civilian population 18 years and older. So this one actually tells me a couple of things. One is it has a margin of error because a lot of this is based on the ACS. So this is an estimate. So it has a margin of error for these counts in each state. And then it's going to tell me some things because the veterans were included in this. It's going to talk about male veterans and non-veterans by age cohort, and then female veterans and non-veterans by age cohort. That actually was interesting to me in some of the research I was doing. So let me go back to search results. Let's go all the way back to start. I could actually clear data, by the way. My geography and my selections are going to stay all the time. I can actually clear data by just kind of toggling between these. It says that all items will currently be removed from my selection. So I click on that and it's gone. So then I can go back again, and I could still go back to Maine for my advanced search, and I could go to show me all again in advanced search. Now there's another thing you can do here on advanced search that I didn't even show you. Oops, I scratch that. I was going to go to the Census of Governments, but I'm not going to do that right now. So topics. If I say governments, again, I could go to the program, and here we have the programs themselves. So I was talking about, I could go to Census of Governments, and some of the same information is going to be available to me here. Okay. So what if I wanted to know what governments collected in taxes? Now, something you should know about the census of governments is the census of government is done in every 5 years, and years that end in 2 and 7. So 2012 and 2017, 2022, 2027, that's when the census of governments is done by the Census Bureau. So let's say I wanted to know about tax collections in various states. So census of government, state government tax collections 2017. So this is fairly recently. So here again, this is the total for the United States of all these various kinds of taxes, right? Now, I should be able to go back to my advanced search and specify geographies. So let me specify geographies, and I'll say state. So let's talk about the state of Nebraska. Add that to my selection. And let's compare that to the state of Colorado. Add that to my selection. So let's go back to Census of Government, State Government Tax Collections 2017. So now we have, in this chart, the various kinds of taxes that were collected by Colorado in 2017 and the state of Nebraska in 2017. I was actually looking for a specific kind of tax because I really didn't know how Colorado collected taxes on the marijuana business, and I'm guessing it's in selective sales and gross receipts taxes, but I'm not sure. So here in Nebraska, we have total taxes collected in 2017 of $5,103,103,000,000. Okay, so $5.1 billion in total taxes. How's that break down? Because we've been talking about taxes a lot lately in this legislative session. So about 2.4 billion in sales tax, broken down. Alcoholic taxes, about $354 million in gas taxes, that is. And then we'll go down to the other big two. Income taxes, about $2.5 billion, and divided between, most of that is individuals, and that's the corporate income tax. So sales tax, income tax, and property tax are the big three, except you're not going to see property tax on here because we don't have a state property tax in Nebraska. We only have local property taxes. So one of the policy issues, if we're going all the way back to how I started this discussion and talking about education, is yes, the state of Nebraska supports K-12 education. That tax base is essentially income tax, and for the most part, it's income tax and probably some sales tax. But the schools in Nebraska are primarily supported by property tax at the local level. So if I'm talking about how is K-12 education supported in Nebraska, I have to be able to draw that bigger picture and say how much support comes from the federal level, how much comes from the state, and how much comes from the local level. So again, go all the way back to my advanced search, and it's going to retain my geographies if I want, but I'm going to go back to Maine here, and I'm going to go ahead and this kills all my geographic preferences. So I gave you an exercise this week, part of which is gathering data for a spreadsheet that I want you to create, and I'm going to get more into that with the other. But the census part of this, what I want you to do is use the American FactFinder to get all the information that I specify in that exercise from this part of the census, the American FactFinder, and you will be able to find all that information to create your data set. So that's my little mini demo on census data. And again, the best way to learn about census data is just use it as much as you can, and you will continue to find new and wonderful things in terms of data about the United States and its political subdivisions. So that ends this demo. The other demos will be on the Bureau of Economic Analysis and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Thanks very much.